how do we share the road? How do we ensure everybody's safety out there who has the right to be on the road? And there's something that I've wondered, and it was clear back with the Mayor Wilson. He's the first mayor that I can recall ever being a champion for bike lanes and things of that nature. That goes way, way, way back. And Mayor Wilson saw the vision of it. It's been basically paid forward by every sitting mayor in Salt Lake City. I know we're talking Centerville where this incident occurred, but all of the communities along the Wasatch Front are looking at what can we do and what should we do when it comes to bicycle safety and to encourage people to use bikes. So are these efforts paying off? Is it worth the taxpayer expenditure? That's one of the conversations going on in Centerville. So I'd like you to chime in. We're going to have this on our Doug Wright Show Facebook page. Is that up and running yet, Cassie? I think it's being posted right now. I want to get your thoughts on this, and I want to open the phone lines too. But I thought we'd kick off the program talking with Don Williams, who is league cycling instructor and road captain of the Bonneville Cycling Club. And Don, thank you for taking our invitation to join us here at KSL. Welcome.
Thanks, Doug.
Let's talk first and foremost, what was your gut reaction when you heard that comment out of Centerville?
Well, I think the councilman and I probably have the same sense of humor. He rattled something off that he really regrets, and Lord knows how many times I've done that myself.
Yeah.
Our club, we're over 500 members here in the Salt Lake, actually in all of Utah, and we ride through Centerville 2 or 3 times a week, and their roads are in pretty fair condition. They have some areas where we already know that restriping roads narrower for the automobile lanes makes the roads safer. We have statistics from the League of American Bicyclists that shows that. And they have some areas where you're riding with 8 feet of shoulder that you can ride on, and all of a sudden you're riding with 8 inches of shoulder because curb cuts are not consistent and that kind of thing. Cyclists react by pulling out into the lane and, taking a little bit more of the lane maybe than they should. And then motorists overreact by, oh my gosh, there's a bike rider out here with us. And nobody's happy.
Yeah, what do the statistics tell us when we do restripe the roads? And, of course, in Salt Lake City, it's much more accommodating than that. There have been complete lanes that are totally separate. Now, there are always places, of course, where things merge, but there has really been an effort in Salt Lake City to not only have the bike lanes striped, but to have them totally isolated and a lane in and of itself.
And that's true. The Bike Summit this year that's held every year by Bike Utah had a specialist on Copenhagenizing the streets the way they do in Copenhagen. And I personally don't like the isolated bike lanes because I think that just creates a separate hazard with pedestrians stepping off the curb or car doors opening on your left as a cyclist instead of on your right if you're in a normal road situation. But to get more people out on bikes, to do the healthy thing, the Copenhagen movement is advocating isolated lanes like that, and so I can see a point for it. I've been like a league cycling instructor for 25 years or something like that, and we kind of like to meld the two together. Motorists and cyclists can in fact share the road and should be able to get along. We teach our new members to ride their bikes like they drive their cars, and hopefully that behavior becomes uniform for anybody that is a road user, be it cyclist or automobile driver.
Yeah. Don, can you stay with us for a second more after this break?
Sure.
All right. And when we come back, I'd like to talk about that because every time I see a cyclist out on the road, first of all, I'm envious. I admire their grit. I admire what they're doing for the environment. I admire what they're doing for their bodies. But it drives me nuts when they just blatantly violate about every law of the road. Now, I know that that's painting with an awfully broad brush, and many of them are just terrific. But wow, especially up on Wasatch Boulevard and other places, it really has been a hazard to them and to others. So what are the rules of the road? What are the ways we can encourage all of us, whether we're in a vehicle, a motorized vehicle, or whether we are on a bicycle, to abide by the law? We're going to talk about that when we come back, continuing our conversation with Don Williams. Plus, I want to hear from you. How do you feel about all of the extraordinary efforts to accommodate bikes? And I'm very pleased that Don Williams, who is the league cycling instructor and road captain of the Bonneville Cycling Club, could join us on the program today. What about this? As I mentioned, I have great admiration for people that are out there on bikes. I appreciate what they're doing for our environment. I wish that I was out there with them, and I know I just need to have the gumption to do it. But get out there. I appreciate what they're doing for their own physical well-being, but it drives me nuts when all of the courtesies of the road are expected and more, and all of the rules and regulations of the road are regularly violated. How big a deal is that with cyclists, Don?
It's a very big deal. I know we hammer into our members and the people that attend our bike club rides that we have to stop at stoplights, we have to stop at stop signs. Idaho has some laws. Amazingly enough, Idaho they allow you to roll through a stoplight if it doesn't recognize that you're there, and I think Utah now has a version of that.
Yeah, we do. Even for motorcycles, it's not rolling through, but when you sit there and wait for a certain period of time, if you haven't triggered the light, then even on a motorcycle you can move on. But there's some very strict guidelines.
Yeah, and the guidelines that our people forget is if there are 4 cars sitting there at the traffic light with you, it hasn't responded to them either, so you don't get to run the traffic light. We've had that happen on a number of occasions. Stop signs, I commute to work an average of once a week all year, and I have to admit, I disobey a couple of stop signs when I'm making right turns, on my ride in the morning, so I'm not an angel either, but it's, we try to teach our riders, all our cyclists, that you ride as far to the right as is practicable and as far to the right as is safe. And then if you ride 2 abreast, as permitted by Utah law, we like for 2 abreast to be where your left hand is a foot or less from the right hand of the person that's next to you, if you're riding, on the right side of the road. And a lot of beginning cyclists or inexperienced cyclists want that to be 4 feet or 5 feet, which of course puts them way out in the middle of the vehicle lane, which nobody's happy with that. I mean, if there's room for somebody to ride up between 2 riders that are already 2 abreast, then you're 3 abreast, you're violating the state law, and, nobody's happy for the rest of the day. But it remains a challenge for, cyclists need to know they've got to get in close. If you look at the pros riding on the Tour of Utah this week, those boys are bumping elbows and things, when they're in the peloton. Of course, they're on closed roads, but they're packing in 150 cyclists into an area where we might only have 25 cyclists because nobody wants to be elbow to elbow.
Sure. As far as the statistics, I'm intrigued by that. You mentioned it right off the top of our conversation, also kind of the Copenhagen guideline out there. What are the statistics telling us? With bike lanes, how much safer are we all?
Well, it gets down to a road use thing, really. I don't have all the statistics off the top of my head, but we do know that when vehicle lanes are narrowed, drivers have to pay more attention, so that inherently gets them to slow down. And giving an area for the cyclist to be supposedly gets a safe area to ride. People that do club rides or get out and ride in groups we do know that they are like 80% safer and to avoid an accident because of group handling skills and all that come from riding in a group. But the real challenge remains, an interaction of people, various road users, intermodal use of the roads remains a difficult thing with, skateboarders, pedal riders that, are not on bicycles, and then motorists and motorcyclists and all that. that's a big conglomeration of folks getting on one road at one time.
Right. How many more people are out there riding? It's my perception that there are tons more people out there using their bicycles versus where we were maybe 10, 15 years ago. Is my perception correct?
Your perception is correct. We're seeing the baby boomers that were marathon runners are blowing out their knees, and they're still looking for some way to get out and be active, and so they move over to cycling, which is much easier on the lower joints. And we've seen, we've had a large influx of marathon runners, the guys that do the Wasatch Back 100 and that kind of thing, have come into our club just to be able to get out and ride 100 miles instead of running 100 miles.
Yeah. I really appreciate your expertise this morning. Is there a problem, and this will have to be really quick, with the Copenhagen model, where it kind of creates those separate bike lanes? Eventually those bike lanes merge again into a regular intersection or onto a regular street at some point or another. Is that kind of being isolated and then kind of being back mainstream and then being isolated again? Is that one of your concerns? I've been thinking a lot about that since you mentioned it.
That is one of my concerns, because you've got the cyclists are sort of out of sight, out of mind. They're isolated over there 8 more feet to the right than what you're used to seeing them. And all of a sudden, like on 3rd South here in Salt Lake, when it runs out, they're back out with you, and it's kind of like, whoa, where did those people come from? In commuting, we teach our riders, like if you're riding up, I do 9th East some in the mornings. And if you've got a spot where there are cars parked along the street, you maintain a line where you clear those doors. And I ride closer to the cars than is really safe, but that allows motorists to get by.
Yeah.
But then when you hit a block where no cars parked, we maintain that line so that you don't drift off to the right, get out of the sight, and then pop back out on the next block where
right.
all of a sudden it looks like you're pulling out in front of a motorist.
Don, I really appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you so much. Don Williams, league cycling instructor and road captain of the Bonneville Cycling Club. All right, I want to hear from you. Do you feel that these bike lanes are a good expenditure of your taxpayer dollars? And I want to hear from cyclists. I want to hear from motorists. You don't